I was alone when the email arrived. It was 2:13 in the morning. Rain tapped softly against the window, and the refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. My apartment felt unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice every little sound. Then my inbox refreshed. One new message. The subject line said, "You already opened this." I stared at it for several seconds, trying to remember if I had clicked something by accident. I hadn't. The sender was an address I didn't recognize. There was one photograph attached. It was my bedroom. Not a photograph that looked like my bedroom. It was my bedroom. My unmade bed. My desk. The blue hoodie hanging from the chair. Even the crack in the wall beside my closet. But the photograph had been taken from inside the room. I slowly looked behind me. Nothing was there. I turned back toward the screen. A new sentence had appeared beneath the photograph. Don't check the window. Naturally, I checked the window. Across the street, beneath a broken streetlight, someone was standing perfectly still. I couldn't see their face. I only knew they were looking directly at me. Then another email arrived. And that's when I realized the photograph wasn't the worst part. Checking that window was my first mistake. For days earlier, my biggest problem had been an overdue electricity bill. To understand how I got from there to that window, you need to know what happened when the first email arrived that night. Before that night, my life was aggressively ordinary. I lived alone in a cheap second-floor apartment where the pipes complained whenever someone upstairs showered. During the day, I worked a boring office job. At night, I came home, microwaved something unhealthy, opened my laptop, and disappeared into the internet. I watched YouTube videos, scrolled through Reddit, bought things I didn't need, and ignored calls from numbers I didn't recognize. My inbox was basically 80% advertisements, 15% companies pretending they knew me, and 5% things I was too afraid to unsubscribe from. So when an email arrived from an address that looked like no reply at randomstring.com, I barely noticed it. The subject said, "You forgot something." I assumed it was spam. Then I opened it. My full name was written at the top. Underneath it was my apartment number. Not my building. Not my street. The exact number on my front door. Then came a sentence. "You shouldn't be living there." I stared at the screen, waiting for the punchline. Maybe it was some targeted scam. Maybe someone had scraped my information from an old account. I'd heard stories like this online before. People talked about things called the midnight inbox and the 3:17 a.m. email, supposedly messages that appeared from impossible addresses. There were posts about people receiving emails from themselves, sometimes containing photographs of places they had never visited. I thought those stories were nonsense. The internet was full of people inventing nightmares because ordinary life wasn't interesting enough. But this email felt different. There was no unsubscribe button, no tracking information, no normal sender history. When I checked the account details, it was as if the address had never existed. I should have deleted it. Instead, I clicked the attachment. The attachment was named img_0417.jpg. It looked like a meaningless file a spammer would send. I almost deleted it. Instead, I clicked. The photograph showed my apartment building from across the street. Nothing seemed wrong. Same cracked pavement. Same dead streetlight. Same silver car beneath my window. Then I noticed something. The photograph had been taken that night. I knew because the silver car was there. The streetlight outside my window had been flickering all evening. In the distance, someone was walking past wearing the same red jacket I'd seen earlier. My stomach tightened. I looked through my window. The street outside was identical. Same car. Same light. Same person disappearing around the corner. Then I zoomed in on my apartment window. There I was, sitting at my desk. Same black shirt. Same headphones around my neck. Same glass beside my laptop. I stopped breathing. I checked the image properties. Every metadata field was blank. No camera model. No location. No creation date. Then another email arrived. You weren't supposed to open the picture. A second attachment appeared. I clicked it. This photograph was taken from inside my apartment. From behind my chair. I could see the back of my head in the image. I stood up. The room was empty. I checked the bedroom, bathroom, kitchen, closet, under the bed, which was ridiculous, but fear makes you stupid. Every lock was secured. I called my friend Daniel. When he answered, I said, "Someone is inside my apartment." He laughed nervously. "Then why are you calling me instead of the police?" "Because the picture shows me sitting here." I sent it to him. He said, "It's probably a hacker or a stalker." Then how did they take the picture? Daniel didn't answer. Finally, he said, "Maybe they didn't." I looked back at the first photograph. In the corner of my bedroom window was a digital clock. The time displayed was 2:41. My phone said 2:37. For minutes hadn't happened yet. That was when I stopped thinking someone was watching me and started wondering if someone was watching me from the future. First, I tried to convince myself the photograph had been some elaborate trick. Then the emails started predicting things. The first one arrived at 11:36. Your neighbor will knock at 11:42. I stared at it, almost relieved. A prediction was easier to understand than a photograph from the future. At 11:42, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. I didn't move. 20 seconds passed. Then another message appeared. He will leave in 23 seconds. I counted. At 23, the footsteps disappeared down the hallway. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, another email arrived. Your phone will ring. It rang immediately. I stopped checking the sender and started checking the clock. Every message gave me something small. A delivery would arrive. A light would flicker. Someone would cough outside my door. None of it was dramatic enough to prove anything. But together, the coincidences became impossible to ignore. So I decided to test it. I wanted to break the pattern. At 9:18, an email appeared. Don't drink the coffee. I laughed. Great, I said to the empty apartment. Apparently my coffee is part of a supernatural conspiracy now. I picked up the mug and drank it. Nothing happened. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 5 minutes. I smiled for the first time since the previous night. Then I saw movement in the reflection of the coffee machine. Someone was standing behind me. I spun around. Nobody. My hands started shaking. I looked back at the machine. The reflection was empty. Then my computer chimed. A new email. You thought we were predicting you. I swallowed. Another line appeared beneath it. We're correcting you. I read those words until they blurred. That was the moment I understood the difference. Predictions told you what was going to happen. Instructions told you what to do. But these emails were doing something much worse. They were showing me what would happen when I disobeyed. And once I realized that, I made the mistake that changed everything. I replied to the next message, finally believing I could force whoever was behind it to reveal themselves. That I stared at the last email for almost a minute before typing. Who are you? I hit send. Nothing happened. For 3 minutes, the screen remained completely still. Then, without a notification sound, a reply appeared. You already know. My mouth went dry. I typed again. What do you want? The response came instantly. You opened the door. I looked toward my apartment door. It was locked. I checked it anyway. Deadbolt. Chain. Handle. Everything was secure. I turned back to the screen. What door? The reply appeared. Not that door. 3 seconds later, someone knocked. I froze. It wasn't loud. Just 2 soft knocks, followed by silence. My computer screen changed. Don't answer. Another message appeared beneath it. Whatever you do, don't let it know you're awake. Every light in the apartment suddenly felt too bright. I switched them off. The refrigerator hummed in the darkness. Rain whispered against the windows. Then I heard breathing outside my door. Slow. Wet. Close. I covered my mouth with one hand. A voice whispered my name. I knew that voice. It was Daniel. Hey, he said quietly. Open the door. I didn't move. My phone vibrated. Daniel was calling. I stared at the screen. His name. His photograph. His number. Everything looked normal. Then the person outside spoke again. It's me. I know you're in there. I opened my laptop and checked our conversation. Daniel had sent me a message 20 minutes earlier. I went home. Call me tomorrow. I looked at the timestamp. Then I heard the voice outside whisper, You call me tomorrow. My blood turned cold. I slowly looked at the email. A final sentence appeared beneath the others. That's not your friend. I stopped breathing. Something on the other side of the door laughed softly. Then the handle began to turn. The handle stopped turning. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then the footsteps outside disappeared. My laptop chimed. A new attachment had appeared beneath the latest email. Read before replying. I opened it. The document contained 6 rules. Never reply twice in a row. Never open an email marked forwarded. Never delete the photographs. Never tell another person the sender's name. If you receive an email containing your own face, stop looking at the screen. If the sender asks whether you're alone, lie. I read them twice. These weren't random warnings. Someone had written them for people like me. At the bottom was a list of names. Dozens of them. Some had dates beside them. Others were crossed out completely. Then I saw one I recognized. Daniel. His name had been added 3 days earlier. I stared at it, unable to understand what I was seeing. Daniel hadn't told me about any of this. Why would his name be there? I scrolled further. There were links to old forum posts, archived discussions, and screenshots from people describing identical emails. Some believed the messages came from something supernatural. Others insisted it was an experiment conducted by a private group testing human behavior. Nobody seemed to know the truth, but they all agreed on one thing. The emails followed rules, and breaking those rules made things worse. At the bottom of the document was a locked section. The title alone made my stomach tighten. What happens after the 7th email? I tried opening it. Password required. I looked back at the email history. 1 message. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had received 6. I suspected the rules weren't meant to protect someone like me at all. And suddenly, the 7th didn't feel like another email. It felt like a deadline that I decided I wasn't going to let the 7th email arrive. I disconnected the Wi-Fi, shut down my laptop, and turned off my phone. Then I unplugged the router and pulled the battery from an old tablet I kept in a drawer. For the first time in days, the apartment was completely silent. No notifications. No humming computer. Nothing. Then my old tablet lit up. I hadn't touched it in months. The screen displayed one new message. The subject was, You made it this far. I couldn't move. There was one photograph attached. I opened it. It showed me asleep in my bedroom. I could see myself lying beneath the blankets, one arm hanging over the mattress. The photograph had been taken from inside the room. Behind the camera was my closet. I looked at the bed, then at myself. I was awake. I checked the timestamp. Tomorrow. Not an hour from now. Not later that morning. Tomorrow. My hands began shaking. Then another line appeared beneath the photograph. There are 2 versions of you now. I zoomed into the picture. Someone was standing beside the bed. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Then I saw the face. It was mine. Same eyes. Same scar above the eyebrow. Same tired expression. If you've ever received a strange email and thought, it's probably nothing, I want you to remember this part. Because I thought that too. I kept staring until the screen displayed one final instruction. Go to the place where you first used the internet. I knew exactly where that was. And somehow, I already knew I was going. It was the old computer room at the library, a place I hadn't visited since childhood. and the thought of returning there made me feel sick without knowing why. The library had closed years ago, but the side door still opened with the same stubborn shove I remembered from childhood. Inside, everything smelled like dust and wet carpet. The old computer room was exactly where I remembered it, except one computer was still running. Its screen glowed in the darkness. I sat down. On the desktop was a folder named Archive. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. People sitting at computers, people standing in bedrooms, people staring through windows. Different decades, different cameras, same pattern. 7 emails. Then nothing. I opened the oldest photograph. The technology looked ancient, but the image showed the same impossible perspective. Someone had been photographed from inside their own room. I kept scrolling. The emails changed with technology, but the pattern never did. 7 messages. Then disappearance. My hands went cold. These people hadn't been randomly targeted. They had all eventually found this archive. And then I saw a photograph of myself. I was sitting at the computer. The same computer. The same room. I checked the date. It was 12 years before I was born. I couldn't breathe. A new folder appeared on the desktop. Unfinished cases. Inside was one file. The subject line read, 8. The victim had received 8 emails. There were 7 photographs. No 8th photograph. No explanation. Just one sentence beneath the file. Case remains active. Then the computer screen went black. For a moment, I saw my reflection. But it wasn't looking at me. It was looking behind me. And when I turned around, someone was standing in the doorway that I don't remember leaving the library. I only remember running. When I finally reached my apartment, every light was on. My laptop was open. One new email waited on the screen. The subject said, "You weren't supposed to find that." I knew immediately what it meant. I had broken the rules. The email contained no photograph. Instead, there was a video. I clicked it. The screen showed me sitting in this exact room, telling this exact story. My voice came through the speakers. If you're listening to this, don't open the email. I stopped breathing. I hadn't recorded the video. I hadn't even written this story yet. On the screen, the other version of me continued speaking. It described the library, the archive, the photographs, things nobody else knew. Then the video version of me looked directly into the camera. His face seemed exhausted, terrified. He leaned closer and whispered, "It's already reading this." The video ended. The laptop screen went black. I sat there staring at my reflection. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then I realized there was one thing I had never told you. Something I found inside that archive. Something that explained why these emails had chosen me in the first place. I found the original email, and it wasn't in the archive. It was in my own sent folder. I opened my sent folder. There it was. An email addressed to myself. I hadn't written it. I hadn't sent it. The timestamp was tomorrow. The message contained one sentence. "If you receive this story, you're next." I stopped typing. For several seconds, I couldn't move. Then my computer made that familiar notification sound. One new email. The subject line read, "Don't read this one." I stared at it, listening to the rain against my window. And I already know who sent it. If you're wondering whether this is just a story, check your inbox. Because mine just changed again.